The morning my father's will was to be read, I sat in a quiet office, heart hammering, palms tight against my knees. My father, Richard Langford, had spent his life building a fortune of $36 million, and I had always assumed I would inherit at least a portion of it. But before the lawyer even opened the folder, my stepmother, Vivian, leaned slightly forward with a smile that felt sharper than a knife. "Don't expect anything, Ethan," she whispered. "Your father and I discussed this. Everything is mine now." Her words hit me like a blow. For years, Vivian had made me feel like an outsider in my own home, a visitor in the life my father had built. Sitting there with my Uncle George beside me, she radiated calm, as if victory were already hers. She crossed her legs, leaned back, and watched, waiting for me to break. I clenched my fists under the table, forcing myself to remain still. Across the room, my mother Clara sat with her jaw tight, eyes blazing. She had protected me from Vivian's cruelty for years, but here, she could do nothing. The lawyer, Mr. Whitman, adjusted his glasses, his voice steady as he began to read. Vivian's smile widened with each word, her confidence growing. She thought the game was already won. But then Whitman turned a page, cleared his throat, and spoke one sentence that made her smile falter, and finally allowed me to breathe. I had never imagined walking into a room where my father's life's work would be divided like items at an estate sale. That morning, dressed in a black suit that felt heavier than my grief, I felt the weight of his absence. Richard Langford had been a giant in my world. A man who had built everything from scratch and never let me forget the value of hard work. He didn't spoil me, but he made me feel seen, important, capable. And yet, as I sat in that solemn office, I worried I might be erased entirely. The office itself was heavy with history, wood-paneled walls lined with law books, their pages smelling faintly of dust. Thick curtains filtered the sunlight into muted shadows. Uncle George, my father's younger brother, sat beside me. George carried himself with quiet strength. He hadn't amassed wealth like my father, but he had a way of grounding me. As a child, he would tell me stories of how Richard had built his first business from nothing, knocking on doors until someone gave him a chance. He had always reminded me that I came from the same resilient bloodline. Across the table, Vivian sat poised in a black silk dress, her hair perfect, not a strand out of place. But her face revealed nothing of grief. While I sat stiff, fists pressed into my knees, Vivian reclined slightly, angled toward Whitman, waiting for confirmation of what she already believed. Her faint smile was foreign to the room, which should have been somber. I had grown up under that look, her way of asserting control, reminding me I was only an obstacle in her life. Vivian had entered my father's world when I was 15. My parents had divorced 2 years before, and Clara had done everything to hold our small family together. She didn't have wealth or power like my father, but she loved me fiercely. When Richard introduced Vivian, I had tried to be polite. She was younger than him, sharp and beautiful in a way that drew attention. At first I hoped we might get along, but I quickly realized she viewed me as competition, a living reminder of the life my father had before her. Her words and looks were always calculated. If I spoke at dinner, she would roll her eyes. If I visited, she would sneer at my clothes. And sometimes, when my father wasn't around, she would whisper with cruel certainty, One day, it will all be mine. Over time, her comments weighed on me, piling up like stones I could never move. I had learned to stay quiet around her. Visits to my father's house became tense, and even the conversations I had with him felt strained. Yet I never doubted he cared. Away from Vivienne, he would ask about school, about life, and remind me, "You have my blood, Ethan. That matters more than anything anyone says." Now, sitting in that office, the question loomed larger than money. Had my father truly believed in me? Did I matter enough to inherit his legacy, or had Vivienne's poison succeeded? I braced myself, ready for Whitman to start reading. Every syllable would decide more than fortune. It would decide whether my father's faith in me had endured. At first I had hoped Vivienne might be someone I could get along with, but it didn't take long to see the truth. She regarded me as competition, a living reminder of the life my father had before her. Her cruelty was subtle, cutting, but constant. On weekends, she would sneer at the clothes my mother, Clara, had bought me. "Your father works hard to build his reputation, Ethan," she would say. "Try not to look like you don't belong." At dinner, if I spoke up, she would roll her eyes, a silent reminder that I was just a child in her eyes. And when my father wasn't around, she leaned close and whispered words I never forgot. "One day it will all be mine. You'll see." At first, I brushed it off as jealousy or insecurity, but over the years her words accumulated, pressing down on me like invisible stones. I learned to stay quiet around her. Visits to my father's home became shorter, conversations with him increasingly strained. I loved him, but I hated the tension Vivienne had woven around him. Still, there were moments that reminded me he cared. He would pull me aside, away from her sharp tongue, asking about school, about life, about whether I believed in myself. He pushed me to excel, to think beyond limits, to never let anyone define my worth. "You carry my blood, Ethan," he said once. "That's worth more than any insult." His words stayed with me, even when Vivienne tried to drown them out. Now, sitting in the quiet office where his will would be read, I wasn't sure which version of my father I would meet. The man who had always told me I was strong and capable, or the man who let his second wife dominate the room and dismiss me. My fear wasn't only about money, it was about his belief in me, about whether I mattered enough to inherit a piece of his life's work. Clara sat 2 seats away, face taut, eyes sharp as glass. She wasn't there for money. She had no claim to my father's estate. She had come because she refused to let me face Vivienne alone. She had endured years of Vivienne's taunts, and now she sat ready to protect me, silent but watchful. Mr. Whitman, tall and composed, cleared his throat and arranged the papers before him. His voice, calm and professional, carried through the room as he explained that my father's will had been meticulously written and updated just months before his passing. Every word hung in the air, echoing off the polished wood walls. Vivienne shifted in her chair, her smile widening as if she were already tasting victory. I could feel her eyes on me, searching for the moment my expression would falter, the instant my disappointment would show. She wanted to see me broken, to erase me from my father's story. Uncle George leaned close, his voice low so only I could hear. "Patience, nephew. Your father was a man of principle. Trust that his choices reflect that." His words were a small anchor in the storm swirling inside me. I sat straighter, staring at Mr. Whitman, bracing myself. I had no control over the words about to be read, no power to alter my father's instructions. All I could do was listen, hold myself together, and hope. In that moment, I realized the reading was about more than money. It was a test of everything my father had taught me: resilience, patience, pride. It was about the weight of my name, the measure of my worth, and whether my father's love had endured despite Vivian's relentless influence. The moment Mr. Whitman began reading, the room seemed to tighten around me, suffocating like a vice. His voice was steady, measured, but every word landed heavy on my chest. He started with smaller bequests, charitable donations, and gifts to distant relatives. Part of my mind was focused on the words, but the other part replayed Vivian's smug expression, the way she leaned back as if she already ruled everything my father had built. When Mr. Whitman announced that Vivian would receive control of certain household accounts and personal belongings, she exhaled slowly and lifted her chin, satisfaction radiating from her every move. She glanced at me, lips curving in a faint, triumphant smile as if to say, "See, it's all mine." Heat rose in my neck, but I forced myself to stay still. Clara's hand gripped her purse tightly. She said nothing, but her gaze pierced Vivian like fire. Uncle George sat composed, upright, listening intently as though he anticipated what Vivian didn't. The lawyer continued, listing properties and assets that appeared to fall under Vivian's control. Each line felt like a blade against me. A coastal home in Florida, gone. The vineyard my father had nurtured for years, gone. Even his prized art collection placed under her name. Vivian's confidence pressed down on me, relentless. She leaned forward slightly, whispering, barely audible to Mr. Whitman but clear to me. "You should have prepared yourself. You were never meant to inherit." He wanted me to have it all. Her words triggered years of memories. The dinners where she sneered at me. The mornings I felt like a stranger in my own father's home. The endless reminders that I was insignificant. I gritted my teeth, trying not to let her see me falter. What if my father had let her win? What if he had truly forgotten me? I clenched my fists under the table, holding back the sting of betrayal. My father had told me once, strength isn't about shouting louder than the world, it's about standing when everyone expects you to fall. His words rang in my mind, but they were nearly drowned out by Vivian's looming presence. Mr. Whitman flipped through the documents, the rustle of paper echoing in the quiet room. I caught Vivian's reflection in the polished surface of the table. Her smile was growing, heat radiating from her confidence. She believed she had already won. Then the lawyer's voice cut through the tension. Before I continue, I remind everyone that this will was updated just 3 months before Mr. Langford's passing. Every clause is legally binding and reflects his final wishes. Vivian's smile remained, but doubt flickered in mine. My father had made recent changes. I had no idea what they entailed. Could he have really shifted everything toward her? Was this his way of leaving me behind? My chest tightened, doubt coiling around me like chains. I stole a glance at Clara. Her eyes said, "You're not alone." For a moment I felt steadier, but Vivian refused to let me breathe. She leaned in, her voice a whisper that hissed like a snake. "Do you see? He chose me. He trusted me, not you. You were just his practice, and now it's my turn to carry his name." Her words cut sharper than any dagger I had endured before. My fists curled tightly beneath the table, my body bracing for what was still to come. I wanted to scream at Vivian, to tear her smug expression to pieces with all the anger I'd buried over the years. But Uncle George's hand landed on my arm, steady and grounding. His voice was a low murmur meant for me alone. "Keep your composure, Ethan. Your father saw everything." His words hit differently. My father had never been blind to people's true nature. He had once told me that money strips away pretense, that when stakes are high, character is revealed. Maybe this was exactly the lesson he had prepared me for. The minutes dragged on, heavy and relentless. Mr. Whitman's voice detailed stock holdings, investment accounts, and corporate shares. Vivian's breathing lightened, almost like she was savoring each word. My chest felt as if it were being pressed under the weight of Richard Langford's empire. Every asset listed felt like another layer of soil on top of me. Then Vivian leaned back, her voice calm, sharp, deliberate. "I told you, Ethan. Your father trusted me with everything. He knew you weren't ready. You should accept that." Clara's face tightened, her jaw rigid, but she said nothing. Uncle George's hand remained firm on my arm, his silent reassurance stronger than any words. I realized why he had come. He knew Vivian would exploit every opportunity to wound me, and he knew I needed someone to anchor me, to remind me I wasn't alone. The struggle in the room was no longer just about the estate. It was about my father's judgment, whether he had truly believed in me, whether he valued the son he had raised over the woman who had married him. Vivian's smugness and Mr. Whitman's unwavering cadence pressed down on me, pushing me toward despair. Then the lawyer shifted, sliding a fresh page from the folder. His expression tightened subtly, the faintest change around the mouth, a slight flick of the eyes in my direction before returning to the document. It was tiny, almost imperceptible, but it made me sit straighter. Vivian noticed too. Her smile faltered for the first time that morning. A mix of dread and hope tightened my chest. I wanted to believe my father had not abandoned me, but Vivian's voice echoed in my mind, whispering that I was insignificant, forgotten, irrelevant. Years of her cruelty threatened to swallow me, and yet I made a decision. I would not break for her. Whether I inherited nothing or everything, she would not witness my defeat. My father's final lesson, the one he had drilled into me over years of guidance, was about resilience. I remembered his words from a long-ago conversation when I struggled at school. Strength isn't measured by avoiding the fall, Ethan. It's measured by rising even when the world expects you to stay down. I tightened my fists under the table and prepared myself for whatever came next. "Ethan, the world will try to break you," Uncle George whispered. "Don't give it the satisfaction. Stand tall even if it's with empty hands." I uncrossed my arms, straightened in my chair, and met Vivian's gaze head-on. Her smirk twitched when she realized I was no longer shrinking. For the first time all morning, a hint of irritation flickered across her face, as if my refusal to crumble insulted her presumed victory. Uncle George leaned closer. "Good. Don't let her win before the last word is spoken." His tone was low, steady, and grounding. Mr. Whitman's voice continued, calm and deliberate. "To my wife, Vivian Langford, I bequeath the home we shared, along with an annual allowance of $150,000 to be distributed from the estate trust." The words landed like a hammer. Vivian froze, her hand tightening on the chair. She had been expecting millions, not a modest yearly sum that barely touched the scale of my father's fortune. For a brief moment her composed mask cracked, revealing a flicker of fear. She quickly rearranged herself, brushing a strand of hair aside, but the doubt lingered. The lawyer paused to let the weight of the words sink in. My pulse throbbed. My heart caught somewhere between hope and disbelief. Clara's eyes sharpened with understanding. and Uncle George squeezed my shoulder as if he had anticipated this all along. Vivian's voice cut through the silence, brittle and sharp. "This can't be right. Richard would never limit me like this. He trusted me with everything." "Mrs. Langford," Mr. Whitman said evenly, "these are your husband's final instructions, signed and legally witnessed 3 months before his passing." Her jaw tightened and she forced a hollow laugh. Of course. Surely the bulk of the estate still comes to me. Richard always said he wanted me secure." I stayed silent for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. I could feel her confidence beginning to unravel. For years she had defined herself as everything while reducing me to nothing. Now with each line Mr. Whitman read, her certainty cracked. I leaned forward, my voice steady. "Funny, Vivian. I don't recall my father ever saying he built his life and fortune for you. He built it for his family." Her head snapped toward me, eyes flashing. "You think you know what he wanted? You were a child when he made those choices. You don't understand the man he became." I met her glare without raising my voice. "I know the man who raised me. He never turned his back on his son." The lawyer cleared his throat, ready to continue, but something had shifted. Vivian's aura of invincibility wavered. For years she had thrived on my fear, my hesitation, my silence. By speaking, I had taken something back. My voice, my presence, my claim to be acknowledged. Mr. Whitman adjusted his glasses and prepared to read the final clause. My chest tightened with anticipation and a strange mix of dread and hope. Everything had led to this moment. The judgment my father had left. His final declaration not only about Vivian but about me. Vivian shifted in her chair, her confidence drained. She leaned forward, hands clasped tightly, nails digging into her palms. She no longer looked like the woman who had entered the room certain of her power. Vivian looked suddenly small, the arrogance drained from her posture, replaced by a shadow of fear. Clara's hand brushed lightly against mine, a silent assurance that I was not alone. Uncle George gave a subtle nod, the faintest curve of a smile touching his lips. Somehow, he had always known that my father would not abandon me. I drew in a deep breath, steadying myself. No matter what the next words revealed, I would face them without fear. I would not be the boy Vivian had belittled for years. I would be the man my father had raised, the one who could stand tall even in the storm of betrayal. Mr. Whitman lifted his eyes from the papers, his voice calm but commanding, as he began the final reading. The room leaned forward, tense and silent, every eye fixed on him. My own heartbeat thundered in my ears. Vivian sat rigid, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. The confidence she had carried in like armor completely gone. To my wife, Vivian Langford, I leave the use of our shared residence and an annual allowance of $150,000, sufficient to meet her needs and comforts, Mr. Whitman said steadily. Vivian's face paled, her lips parting in shock. She opened her mouth to argue, but the lawyer continued without pause. "The entirety of my estate, including all real estate, business shares, investments, and assets totaling $36 million, I leave to my only son, Ethan Langford, in full and permanent ownership." The words hit the room like a hammer. Silence fell heavy and absolute. My chest tightened. I could hardly breathe. I had expected something, perhaps a token, but not this. Not the whole legacy. Vivian lurched forward, chair scraping against the floor, her voice trembling with desperation. "What? This can't be right. There must be a mistake." Mr. Whitman lowered the document and met her gaze evenly. "Mrs. Langford, this will reflect your husband's final wishes. It was prepared with his direct input, signed and legally witnessed 3 months before his passing. There is no error. No! Vivian slammed her palm against the table. He promised me security. He told me I would carry on his legacy. You expect me to believe he left it all to this? This boy? Clara's posture stiffened with quiet satisfaction, though she said nothing. Uncle George leaned in, calm but resolute. Richard Langford was a man of clarity. Vivian, if this is what he wrote, this is what he intended. He trusted his son. Vivian turned her fury on me, her eyes blazing. You think you deserve this? You were hardly there. You let him down more times than I can count. He said you weren't ready, that you lacked his discipline. I met her gaze without flinching. For years her words had wounded me, but not now, not after hearing my father's final judgment. I drew a steady breath and said, he may have doubted me at times, but in the end he trusted me. That was his decision, not yours. Vivian's hand shook as she gripped the table. You manipulated him. That's the only explanation. He would never... Her voice faltered, words choking off. She turned to Mr. Whitman, desperation in her eyes. Read it again. There must be some hidden clause, some condition. The lawyer shook his head, his voice unwavering. There are no conditions. This is your husband's final and legally binding will. The estate is to be left entirely to Mr. Ethan Langford. These were your husband's explicit instructions. The finality in Mr. Whitman's tone left no room for argument. Vivian's composed facade crumbled, her elegance replaced by raw panic. She pressed a hand to her temple, shaking her head, muttering in disbelief. This cannot be happening. Inside me something shifted. For years I had carried the weight of her cruelty, doubting myself, wondering if my father had ever truly seen me. Now in black and white, his trust in me was unmistakable. This was never just about money. It was his recognition, his faith, his final lesson. I glanced at Uncle George. Quiet pride shone in his eyes, and he gave me a subtle nod as if to say, this is the man Richard raised. My mother's hand found mine, squeezing gently. She whispered, he believed in you all along. Vivian's voice rose again, trembling with desperation. I will contest this. I will take it to court. You can't just give everything to him and leave me with nothing. Mr. Whitman remained composed. You are entitled to pursue legal action, Mrs. Langford, but this will is airtight. Your husband took every step to protect his son's inheritance. Her fury shifted into something colder, sharper. You think you've won, Ethan? Money won't make you strong. You will fail, and when you do, you'll wish I were there to guide you. I stood, finally shedding the weight of silence. My voice was steady, unwavering. No, Vivian. I do not need your guidance. My father believed in me, and that is more powerful than anything you could ever take away. Her face turned ashen, lips trembling, but she had no response. She slumped back, her anger fading into defeated silence. Mr. Whitman gathered the papers, signaling the end of the reading. That moment marked more than the conclusion of a legal process. It marked the end of Vivian's control, the end of her whispered cruelty, the end of her power over me. I stood, the weight of $36 million heavy but not overwhelming. The inheritance was not merely wealth. It was vindication. My father had seen me, trusted me, chosen me. For years I had questioned it, but now the proof was undeniable. Vivian sat frozen, her silence louder than any threats she could make. Clara and Uncle George stood beside me, a quiet shield against her gaze. I moved toward the door, each step feeling lighter than the last. Before leaving, I turned to Vivian one final time. You were right about one thing. He made a choice, but not the one you expected. He chose to trust me, not you. Her eyes burned with fury, but there was nothing left for her to say. The will had spoken. I stepped into the hallway, inhaling deeply for the first time since entering the office. My father's legacy, and more importantly, his belief in me, was mine. The air outside was crisp, free of the weight of Vivian's presence. The will had been read, the verdict delivered, the truth undeniable. My father had trusted me. His empire, his fortune, his life's work, all of it was in my hands. But more than that, I carried the certainty that I was worthy, his faith in me etched into every part of my being. I had carried Vivian's words like weights chained to my chest, believing every sneer, every whisper meant my father had secretly sided with her. When he was alive, I never confronted him. Part of me feared the answer. Now the truth was undeniable. He had not turned away. He had chosen me. As I descended the steps of the law office, my mother walked beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm. Your father knew exactly who you were, Ethan. He was proud of you. Don't forget that. Her voice blended relief and quiet triumph. For years she had endured Vivian's cruelty, watched me shrink beneath it, and waited for the moment the truth would surface. Today it had. Uncle George met us at the curb, his usual reserved expression giving way to a rare, wide smile. Your father never doubted you. He set the bar high and you reached it. Now you carry his name. Carry it well. I nodded, the weight of his words pressing as heavily as the inheritance itself. $36 million was not just wealth. It was responsibility. Every brick my father laid, every deal he struck had been more than financial. It had been about vision, endurance, and character. Inheriting his estate meant proving myself worthy of the trust he had placed in me. Vivian remained behind in the office. I could imagine her staring at the documents, her carefully constructed world collapsing. For years she had believed she could control the narrative, but my father had ensured she would have comfort, not authority. He had seen through her ambition and chosen to protect me. That evening, back in my room, I sat alone for hours. The papers from Mr. Whitman lay stacked neatly on my desk. $36 million, entire companies, properties spanning the country. The weight of it should have made me feel powerful, but instead I felt humbled. My father had not handed me fortune for comfort. He had left me a challenge, responsibility. I thought about the lessons he had drilled into me over the years. Waking early, focusing on what mattered, ignoring those who wanted to see me fail, understanding that his blood in my veins was more than biology. It was inheritance of strength. Those lessons were worth more than any sum written on a page. In the following days, I noticed the world shift. Old friends reached out. Distant relatives offered congratulations, some seeking connection, others opportunity. My father's words returned to me. Wealth reveals character. And they were true. People showed themselves as they always had, now through the lens of my inheritance. Most importantly, I no longer lived in Vivian's shadow. For years she had defined my sense of self. Every insult, every smirk, every whispered threat had eroded my confidence. Now her power was gone, and with it the lie that I was insignificant. When I visited my father's grave the following week, I stood silently for a long time before speaking. You trusted me, Dad. I won't waste it. I'll honor what you built and make sure no one ever doubts your son's strength. It was a promise to him and to myself. The lesson I carried from that day was simple but enduring. The world will try to make you feel small, unworthy, powerless. But if you refuse to give them that control, if you stand firm and trust yourself, you claim the strength that was always yours. But when you trust yourself, when you remember who you are and the roots that shaped you, no one can take that away. Vivian believed she had already claimed victory. She thought she could erase my place in my father's life, rewrite his legacy to her own design. Yet the truth proved stronger than her deceit. My father's faith in me endured, and that faith is now mine to carry forward, worth more than any fortune. That's why when Mr. Whitman read the final line of the will, a quiet, unstoppable relief washed over me. If this story resonated with you, consider liking the video so others can hear it too. Share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own strength and worth. Leave a comment telling me how you would have handled my situation. And subscribe for more stories that inspire, challenge, and keep you hooked until the very last word.